Welcome to the Tiny House Ideas podcast. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Tiny House Ideas podcast. Today I'm interviewing a really special guest, and I'm really glad to be sharing this with you guys. I interviewed McKeown, the New York Times bestselling author. He wrote Essentialism. It's an audiobook that I've listened to. I've read it as well, and it sort of really inspired me, and it's sort of, I guess, minimalism, but sort of in terms of mindset. So how can you sort of say no to things that aren't going to add value to your life and make sure that you're focusing on what's essential in life? So we have a really in-depth conversation, not only about the book, but also about how essentialism sort of relates to tiny living, about any sort of some of his personal anecdotes as well. So there's tons and tons of value in this podcast episode, and I really do hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Tiny House Ideas podcast, the show where we talk about how to live a more fulfilling life with less. My name's Harry Alvarez-Garman, and I've got tons of exciting guests lined up for you, including authors, entrepreneurs, and tiny house owners. If you love minimalism, sustainable living, personal development, and everything in between, then you're in the right place. On the show, we'll be talking about how you can do more of what you love, how to turn your passion into a career, and how to live more sustainably.
My name is McKeown. I'm the author of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, host of the What's Essential podcast, and soon to be published, Effortless, Make It Easier to Do What Matters.
Amazing. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to be speaking to, and I'm really sort of interested into delving into more about obviously the projects that you've been working on and hearing more about your work, and also sort of discussing it in terms of tiny houses as well, and sort of hopefully giving the audience some really cool insights.
Well, again, thank you for having me. Let's do it.
Amazing. So I guess in terms of for those people that are listening, I'm sure most of them have heard of you, but in case they haven't, would you mind sort of just briefly going over, I guess, essentialism and speaking about your work and things like that?
Essentialism is a way of thinking. It's the disciplined pursuit of what really is essential and eliminating all the non-essential from your life. And then, once you know what it's all about, creating a system to make it as easy, as effortless as possible to be able to do that going forward. So really, those three things: explore, eliminate, and execute, is the essence of what essentialism is. And so what I think is that you can actually become an essentialist. It's not just one more thing you think about or do, it's something you become. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Well, that's great to hear it from you as well. I think it's worth saying as well, my sort of personal experience with essentialism is I went traveling last year, obviously when we were still allowed to, in fact the year before, on a gap year between sixth form and university. And I remember I was sat literally leaving London on my way to Paris for the first stop of the trip, and I had my earphones in, listening to some audiobooks, and I was listening to Essentialism, and it was the idea of sort of focusing on less but better, and sort of making sure that you're really sort of putting things in place to make sure that you're sort of really achieving what you want to and sort of getting what you want out of life. And I think that sort of came at quite an interesting time for me, because obviously I was sort of going off on these travels, on these adventures, and I thought, hang on, I'm sort of packed this schedule, I'm making myself busy, and I've got so many things to tick off. And then I sort of thought, well, what if I sort of look at trying sort of explore it and see what happens? And I think that was sort of opened my eyes to it. And then as I've sort of come back, sort of applied it to business and to my own life and my own sort of personal development journey, which has been really valuable. So first of all, thank you for that. Well, it sounds like you've made some really interesting innovations with the idea. And I do believe that books are not entirely dead things. There's sort of half a life in them, but somebody has to come and join in that conversation. And that's what you've done. You have to be part of that conversation and do something with it. Otherwise, it still sits half alive on the shelf. And you brought a lot of life to it. So I love seeing and hearing what you've done and your experiments with essentialism. It's terrific.
Amazing. But no, it sort of has had a really big impact on my life. And in terms of when I did go to university, I felt like I was there were a lot of things I was trying to balance in terms of trying to run a business and trying to keep up with the studies and everything. And I was sort of feeling relatively burnt out and sort of, like you say, stretched too thin as well is one of the phrases that you use. So it's been interesting to sort of experiment with the processes that you talk about and sort of find ways to apply it to my own life. And I think also what's interesting is obviously with me sort of coming from the industry of tiny houses and in terms of alternative living, I guess. Although obviously minimalism, I guess, is sort of a physical version of essentialism, I guess people would say. I sort of took some of your concepts and thought it is very applicable to sort of tiny houses in terms of alternative living, sort of making sure that you have less but better and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the principle less but better, I think, is so powerful. Dieter Rams is the one, at least I've credited with it, and I think it's the first I can find of using that term. And he applied it, of course, to all of the products that he created at Braun over 35 years of running their products division. And at first, there were products that he applied that design ethic to that people struggled to appreciate at the beginning. One of the more famous examples was when he took on creating a new record player. At the time, record players were, because they gave, people thought of them as a piece of furniture, they would make a record player look like a big chest of drawers or something, sort of massive piece of, and that's what they were. So you were hiding the record player so that it would sit in the room and appear, And so he comes along and he says, look, let's just strip the furniture away. This is a record player. Let's strip away all the complexity, all the unnecessary stuff. And what he created was really beautifully crafted and simple, and nothing but the thing itself. But at the time, people, talked about it being like Snow White's coffin, that they weren't quite sure how to appreciate it when they first saw it.
It seemed like such a foreign concept.
Exactly. And yet afterwards, there was, literally almost no record players that have been created since that didn't copy his design. That is what a record player became after he had stripped away the non-essential. I think in the same way, other applications of essentialism, perhaps including what you're describing as alternative living, have that sort of feel to it that at first people think, well, this is so odd or so different. It's not what we're used to. But over time, people start to say, oh, that's what it is. That's, if you strip out all the noise, if you strip out all the non-essentials, this is what you're left with. And so it can be quite a gift. I know it's not for everyone, tiny houses, of course, but still the application of essentialism can feel like the journey Dieter Rams went on.
Thanks for watching this little teaser for the Tiny House Ideas podcast. If you'd like to listen to the full episode, it's available on all major streaming platforms, so that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all of the others. Alternatively, if you'd rather watch it sort of in a video format like this video has been, then that's available on Patreon. Just search for Tiny House Ideas. So thanks again for watching. Please do check out the full episode, and thanks again.